What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video today we're going to learn about the Linux file system and we're going to discuss what the different directories are used for. So let us get right into it. Alright, so we're going to discuss the Linux directory structure or the Linux file system in this video today. And my goal is to give you a basic understanding of what each directory in the root path is used for and what the role of this directory is in the operating system. And also what you as a user can do in that directory, what you can find there, what you might have to change there, what you might have to do with that directory in your workflow. So we're going to start by navigating to the root path, to the root directory, which is called /, and we can do that either in the terminal or in the file manager. So in the terminal, you would just say cd for change directory, and we would navigate into the root path. And here we can just call ls to see the different directories, to see the various directories inside of the root directory. And you can see we have bin, dev, home, lib32, media, mount, processes, root, and so on and so forth. And we can also navigate to this directory using the file manager. Usually it's not listed here as a shortcut. I created one myself. Usually you have to go to other locations and then you have to click on your computer, on your hard drive, and then you see the same directories here as well. And those are the folders, the directories that I want to discuss in this video today. Some of those are very, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but less relevant to you as a user because you're not going to interact with them that often. Some of those are very essential to your workflow. So some of those are not just for the system to have some libraries and binaries. Some of those are directories where you will have to change stuff, where you will have to mount something into that directory, where you will have to look into a log file that's stored in that directory. And this is what we're going to discuss here. We're going to go through all of those and we're going to cover them sometimes briefly, sometimes in more detail. And I have a specific structure in mind for this video. So I have on my second screen some notes. I'm going to go through the directories in a specific order. And I'm going to cover specific points here. So don't be confused when I look occasionally onto my second monitor. So the first directory that I want to start with is one that you probably know, probably the first directory that every user, every Linux user knows is the home directory, because the home directory is essentially the directory where all of your user files are stored. Everything that relates to you as a user is stored in home. So we can go to home, and in here we have the user directory for Neural 9. If you have multiple users on the same system, you're going to have multiple directories for these users. So you will have Neural 9, then you will have user 1, user 2, user 3, and so on. And all of these users have their own stuff inside of their user directory. So when we navigate to Neural 9 here, you will see I have desktop, documents, downloads, pictures, videos, but also some stuff like basic config files. So I can go ahead and open with VI the bash rc file here, which is essentially just my config file for the bash. Or we also have the .config directory here. So we have a bunch of hidden directories here as well. But this home directory here is the user directory or the place where we have the different user directories. And the user directory then is the central place where all of the user files are stored. So everything that relates only to your user, all the data is stored inside of home, inside of your user directory. Now, such a directory also exists for the root user, but it's not inside of home, it's inside of /root. So root and root path are not the same because / is the root directory, the topmost directory in the file system, but then you also have /root, which is the user directory for the root user. And you can see I already need sudo privileges to go to the root directory here. I have to enter my sudo password. Probably I have to do sudo su, and then I can go to /root. There you go. But I don't want to be root here now, so let's clear that. So the root directory is essentially the same thing that we just discussed for the different users, but for the root user, which is the most powerful user in the system. So it's the super user, it's the root user. That is the user directory for this user. Now, then we have a bunch of directories here that are not really relevant to us in terms of us doing stuff there. We need to know what is located there. Sometimes you need to know where certain things are installed. especially if you want to go deeper into the system, maybe doing some open source contribution, compiling the system, but then probably you're not watching this video. But there are a bunch of directories here that contain binary files. So binary files or libraries for binary files and stuff like that. And the obvious one here is the bin directory. So the bin directory contains essentially binary files. So /bin, you can see we have here a lot of the basic commands that you probably know. So I think we will find stuff like ls, copy, and cat, stuff like that. So maybe let me grep here ls. You can see we have the ls tool is in that directory. The binary for the ls command is in here. Probably grep, which I just used, is also here. There you go. So these basic binaries like cat or grep or ls or cp or mv, those commands, those binaries are located in /bin, because this is basically just the directory where we have the executable files and binaries for single user mode. So where we don't need root privileges, they're not system binaries, they're user binaries. Now we also have a bin directory for system binaries, which is the sbin directory. So if you go to sbin here, you can see we also have some executables here, but those are system executables. You can see shutdown in here. You can see stuff like ifconfig and fdisk. So where's ifconfig? Ifconfig, there you go. Fdisk should be here somewhere. There you go. Everything that requires root privileges for certain actions or that is related to the system is stored here. So here we have the system binaries. In bin, we have the single user mode binaries. That's the distinction here. Now, we also have a bunch of different lib directories here. So lib is essentially just a directory where we store shared libraries for bin and sbin, or oftentimes used by bin and sbin. So all the binary libraries that are used here or that are in the system are stored in lib, and then we have lib32, libx32, lib64, which are basically just different binary formats. It's the same role, we have just binary libraries in there, but for 32-bit, for 64-bit, and so on, those are just different binary formats here, so for compatibility. But inside of lib, you can see we have a lot of libraries and packages that are used by bin and sbin, and also by other applications. So those are the directories that you're probably not going to interact with in terms of going into that directory and doing stuff in there. Now you're technically interacting with it all the time when you use ls and grep and cd and cp and stuff like that, but you're not going to actively go into bin or into lib and do some stuff in there unless you probably know what you're doing, so you wouldn't need this video. Those are system binaries and system libraries. Then we also have another directory that you're probably not going to interact with too much, which is the boot directory. And the boot directory is essentially just a directory that contains stuff that is important to boot the system. And this is basically all you need to know about boot. It has files that are necessary to boot the operating system. And unless you have some reason to do something in there, just don't touch this directory, because that's not something that you have to do in your everyday Linux life unless you, as I said, know what you're doing. Then we have a more interesting directory, which kind of relates to bin, sbin, and kind of the libs, the lib directories here, which is the etc. directory, the etc directory, because this directory now is basically a directory that contains different files. So it's not just one specific type of thing that's in here. It's a directory where you put stuff that doesn't really belong into any of the other directories. And usually what you will find here is administrative scripts, config files, and stuff like that. So everything that has to do with the binaries, configuration files for the different binaries, configuration files for drivers, configuration files like host, for example. So you can see here the host file here. So what basically is translated, this is basically a local resolution of IP addresses and domain names. So you basically say, okay, this is localhost, and this is something that you will encounter a couple of times here in your Linux life, that you will have to add something to your hosts file or you have to change something in there. Another thing would be fstab, not cd, sorry. fstab. Do we have this? Not cd. Come on. This is a file, for example, that describes how certain things are mounted by default. So basic mounting points here. And you can see what I'm doing here is I have a second hard drive in my system, which basically contains my Windows operating system, the old one that I'm not really using anymore, but I still keep it for emergencies if I have to use Windows for some reason. And this is the identifier of the partition that I want to mount, and I'm mounting it into this path. And in this file, I describe how this happens automatically every time I boot the system. And you have a bunch of different config files in here. So that is probably what you should remember about etc, etc, is that you have all sorts of changeable configuration files and administrative scripts in here. So this is a relevant directory because you're going to have to change stuff here when you want to do some customized stuff, when you want to customize behavior of your audio driver or your audio devices or the software that is controlling all these audio devices. When you want to set something in here, when you do some networking configurations, you will probably have to work with etc, with etc. Then we also have the opt directory, which is this one here, the optional directory. And essentially what we do here is we store software packages that are installed manually or that are installed by third parties. So when you install something that is not installed by the package manager, or it's not installed automatically on your system, when you unpack something and you want to put it somewhere, you usually put it into opt. So you can see here I have Firefox, I have Google, which is probably Google Chrome, I have Notion, I have Zoom, I have Etcher, I have Anaconda 3. Everything that I install manually is installed into /opt. So this is where you put your software packages that are not automatically installed somewhere else by package managers, for example. So that's that. Now let's move on to the user directory. So the USR directory, which is not the same as the user directory in home, because in home you have the username. Here you have basically user-related files and directories, binaries, libraries, and stuff like that in read-only, or that are meant for read-only use. So you don't really have anything here that needs to be written by multiple users or written into by multiple users. You just have your read-only files here. And one example of what you could store here, or what is stored here, is fonts. So you can go to user, share, and then fonts. And then you can see the different fonts that are installed here. So this is just one example of what you can store here, but essentially you have all these user-relevant files that are read-only, like a font, for example. That is what you will find here. Then we also have the var directory. So let me just clear here. Let me just do ls. The variable directory. And as the name already says, this contains variable files, meaning files that change during system operation. And usually what you will find here is log files. So whenever you want to look at some logs, what has been installed recently, what you have been doing recently, you're going to find it here in the var directory. And one example of that is you can go to /var/log/apt and you can look here at the history log, and you will find all the different things that you have been doing with the app package manager. You can also go one directory up and also look at the dpkg.log file. And here you will also see the various things that you have been doing. And I also have actually a shortcut in my bash rc file, which I call recent installs. And recent installs basically just means that this lists all the installation commands that I have been running using apt, or in general when I install something. So when I go and say recent installs, you can actually see that I get a list of things that I have been recently installing, or recent installs detail or detailed. There you go. You can see what I have been installing here. I can see the history of my installs. So this can be quite useful. This is what you store in the /var directory. Then we also have the /temp directory, TMP. Where is it? There you go. And this is essentially just a directory for temporary files. Those files are short-lived. They're not meant to survive reboots. We don't store anything there that we expect to survive when we restart the system. This is just something where we put stuff and we are okay if it is removed in the next reboot or with the next reboot. So this is just publicly writable, so you need to also be careful what you put in there, because everything you put in there can be seen publicly, can be written publicly, and yeah, this is just a directory for temporary files. So I don't know if I have anything in there. Yeah, some stuff is in here. I don't really know what all of this is about, but we have temporary files in there. Next up, we have a very important directory, which is the devices directory, the def directory. This does not stand for development, it stands for devices. And in here, when we go to /def, you can see all the different devices that we have here. And one of the most important ones to look for is this, where is it? This SDA or SDB or SDC and so on, or also these NVMe files here. So every device in Linux is represented by a file, and this file is then how you access or how you work with a specific hard drive, for example, or a USB flash drive. So when I go to the disks directory in Pop! OS or in GNOME, you can see here that when I click on my Linux hard drive here, you can see I have this SSD, which is connected through SATA. And you can see that the device is actually def/def/SDA, and the individual partitions are SDA1, SDA2, SDA3, SDA4, and so on. And if I would have another hard drive of the same kind, it would be SDB, and it would have the partitions SDB1, SDB2, SDB3, and so on. And then for my Windows hard drive, I have a different format, which is this NVMe hard drive, which is the different type of SSD. And in this case, you can see that my Windows hard drive has the partitions NVMe 0 and 1 P1, P2, P3, and P4. This is my Windows system here. So here we have all the devices. We can also actually see what happens. Let me just try this out here. I'm going to take a USB flash drive out of my box here, and I'm going to plug it into my computer. So let's go ahead and plug in a USB flash drive down here. And now when we go to disk, so you can see I actually, now I have to plug in my mouse, because otherwise, because my mouse is now a wireless mouse, and this doesn't work too well when it's plugged into in next to a storage device for some reason. But you can see now I have this block device, and you can see it's at def mapper crypt swap or whatever. And if you have different devices, different SSD drives and so on, they're going to be listed in the respective device file here, or they're going to be that device file here. Then we also have some special devices here. For example, def random or def urandom are what you can access to access the random number generator of the kernel. And then you also have stuff like, where is it, def null, which is what you will oftentimes see in certain commands, that something is fed into def null, basically meaning discarded, because def null, everything you write into def null is basically ignored and meaningless, nothing is changing. So sometimes you will find some script being executed, and then the result is fed into def null because we don't care about it, we just discard it. This is what this means. So this is the def directory, very important one. Then related to devices, we also have the media directory here, which is essentially commonly used to mount as a general purpose, or not as a general purpose, sorry, as a mount point for removable media. So here you usually want to mount USB drives, you want to mount external HDDs, for example, external hard drives, external CDs that you put into your computer if you have a CD drive. This is where you want to put all of this. So if we go to media, right now I have for Neural 9 this Pop! OS USB flash drive. So this is actually this flash drive here. If I open it in the terminal, you can see it's in media. It's a removable drive, so it's automatically mounted to /media. And this is also the purpose here of /media. It's usually an automatic mounting point. So this is where devices, when you plug them in, are mounted automatically. This is the purpose of /media. We also have /mnt /mount, which is the general purpose mounting point for file systems, for network shares, or for other storage devices. So for example, I showed you that I'm mounting Windows onto MNT. Probably, I'm not even sure if I should do that, because I'm not sure if /media would be the proper way, because I'm automatically mounting it every time I boot the system, because mount is actually a directory that you would use for short-term mounting. So if you don't really want to keep something mounted long-term, so probably I should change that. Maybe I should mount Windows somewhere else, but this is where I mount my Windows file, but you can also mount SSH network shares. So if you have some SSH or SFTP server that you connect to, you can also mount it at /mount and do something with it. There's also a possibility. Yeah, so this is mount, media, and dev. Then we have a bunch of directories that are probably not going to be too interesting to the average user. We have /procs or processes. We have /sys for system. We have /run, and we have /serve or server. Now, this processes directory here is essentially just for hardware information and information about processes that the user can access. So for example, what we can do here is we can go into processes and we can just cat CPU info, and then we would get a bunch of information about the CPU. Stuff like that is located in here. I personally have not really done anything in this directory yet. I'm just listing it here for the sake of completeness. The sys directory, so system directory, has several files that provide an interface to the Linux kernel. So it's a little bit like the processes. Probably, I'm not really sure what exactly it's doing. I never needed it, so I think that unless you're doing some advanced stuff, you're not going to need it either. So it's very hardware related, very low level, and this is just, yeah, it provides interfaces to the Linux kernel is how we're going to cover it here, because I cannot really say much more about this one. Then we also have /run, as I mentioned. Run is essentially runtime information, state files for various system components. We have just data in there that's required during system runtime. This is why it's called run. So we can look into it, but I don't really have anything that I can show you here. So it's just system stuff again. And the serve directory is actually, in my case, empty, because this is a directory mainly interesting probably for servers, because here you have all the files and directories related to providing services, to services provided by the system, FTP files, FTP stuff, things like that. So not very interesting probably to most desktop users. And that is almost it. We have two more directories that are not really part of the Linux file system per se. They are a little bit special in terms of maybe you don't have them on your system, and those are the directories recovery and snap. I think snap is quite obvious. This is the snap package manager, which is a package manager by Canonical, which you can use to install certain packages, oftentimes not open source packages or not necessarily free packages, free as in freedom. But this is just where you have the snap stuff. So we can go into snap and you can see I have here Spotify and stuff like that, PyCharm, OnlyOffice. This is what you can find in this directory here. And then finally we have recovery, which is, as far as I understand this, specific to Pop! OS, because in recovery I can actually not access this. So let's go sudo su. recovery. This is basically, it contains a full copy of the Pop! OS installation USB flash drive. You can use it as a live USB, so you can boot into Pop! OS and use it as a live operating system in case this is necessary. And you also have various mechanisms in here to recover the system if necessary. So this is something specific to Pop! OS. So yeah, this is the Linux file system explained hopefully as simple as possible. The most important thing in my opinion to summarize it is, and I'm not going to go through all the directories again, but what you need to know as a user so that you have something you can focus on. Your user related stuff is in /home. Your devices are in dev. When you take those devices and you want to mount them into the system, you do that either in media or you do that in mount. Mount is general purpose and short term. And media is for removable drives like USBs, external hard drives, stuff like that. You have the etc. directory, which is for config files. You have the var directory, which is for log files. And then, is there anything more? Yeah, I would say this is the most important stuff. And in optional, in opt, you have your third-party packages or your manually installed packages. You can put them in here. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting a like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you much for watching. See you in the next video and